to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Exodus chapter 21. Moses is on Mount Sinai receiving the law from God. This law is a covenant agreement between God and the Israelites, which the Israelites should follow if they want God to live with them and among them. Sometimes it's hard to read Old Testament laws because we don't always quite relate to the culture. Sometimes they sound too harsh, and sometimes they sound too lax. But if we really try to use our imagination and put ourselves in this context, we begin to see that all of these laws are meant to protect the vulnerable and to increase love among the community. And those are things that we need today more than ever. So a lot of these laws are much more applicable than we first initially think. Now these are the ordinances which you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall go out as a free man without payment. If he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to the master, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out as a free man, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he will serve him permanently. And right out of the gate, you can kind of see what I mean. These first laws deal with relationships between masters and their slaves. And when we really look at these laws, they're never an endorsement of slavery, but protection for people who are already slaves. Slavery is a horrific institution, and it wasn't in the Eden ideal. In fact, all of the Israelites in this moment have a first-hand understanding of the horrors of slavery because they were just liberated from slavery in Egypt. Nevertheless, the ancient Israelites lived in a time and culture and society where it was normalized. Slavery was practiced. Now, it's also important to realize that the slavery that was being practiced here is not exactly like our Western understanding of slavery from the 1800s. It was explicitly forbidden to kidnap and steal people and sell them as slaves. We'll learn that later in this chapter. More likely, these slaves were people who were bought into servitude in order to pay off a debt they owed. In the midst of all of this, God sees that those slaves need protection. As such, some of these laws include releasing slaves even if they haven't paid their due after 6 years of service, and letting their wife and kids go with them. Now, this stuff would have been revolutionary at the time. I mean, slaves in the ancient world were completely seen as property, not as fellow human beings, and definitely not as people with families. If a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have the authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he will not do these 3 things for her, then she shall go out for nothing, without the payment of money. These laws regarding female slaves also seem really gross to us. These laws seem to be referring to a practice that's sort of like an arranged marriage. And it's, again, a horrible institution. But God saw the suffering and realized that intervention needed to be taken to protect these women. Notice the humanity and decency demanded by the man to the woman in such a degrading situation. God says you're not allowed to sell her to a foreign people. You have to treat her like a daughter. You have to make sure she has food and shelter and rights. And if she doesn't, she's free to walk. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place to which you may flee. If, however, a man acts presumptuously toward his neighbor, so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar, that he may die. He who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. He who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And next we have a list of capital offenses. These include things like premeditated murder, although exception is made for murders of passion. We also see striking and cursing parents, and kidnapping, human trafficking. Right, and this is how we know that our Western concept of slavery is different than the one being practiced here by ancient Israel. Of course, it doesn't excuse the slavery that was practiced in ancient Israel, but it is comforting to know that being a slave trader, as we would imagine them, was punishable by death. If men have a quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but remains in bed, if he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall only pay for his loss of time, and shall take care of him until he is completely healed. If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. If men struggle with each other, and strike a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet there is no injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. If a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. Now, these laws deal with someone who does harm, but doesn't go all the way to kill someone. And the result is to place a limit on revenge to ensure justice and reparations. Now, very rarely was this literally eyes for eyes. It worked really in the same way it does today. A monetary value would be placed on what an eye was worth. And so if someone injured another person, they would have to pay in accordance to that injury. And we also note how slaves again find protection in that they are released in the event that an eye is knocked out or a tooth is knocked out. And their master is punished if they kill the slave. We also see that pregnant women and babies are protected too. If an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall go unpunished. If, however, an ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it kills a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. If a ransom is demanded of him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is demanded of him. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it shall be done to him according to the same rule. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. If a man opens a pit, or digs a pit and does not cover it over, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall become his. If one man's ox hurts another so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide its price equally, and also they shall divide the dead ox. Or if it is known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, yet its owner has not confined it, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall become his. The final laws in this chapter deal with protection of other people's property, as well as controlling your own. This was pretty crucial, as most people's financial assets were wrapped up in the livestock that they owned. So it was important to take care of your livestock and make sure they didn't injure another person or family member or other person's livestock. So without a doubt, a lot of these laws sound foreign to us in our context. But also notice how these laws are extensions of the Ten Commandments. What does it look like to honor your father and mother? Not striking and killing them. What should the punishment be if someone does murder or does steal or does destroy another person's property? So even though you may never have a pit that another person's donkey falls into, you still have the everyday application to take responsibility for your actions and to respect other people's property. In all, these laws were meant to protect the vulnerable, to limit chances for sin, and promote equality and love for people of all social ranks. And those are all things we strive for and need to strive for even today. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.